we ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
If I was trained to speak my mind, I'd tell to all mankind of how the flowers do bloom and fade, of how we fall and how we live. This weary world has had its slip of words of war on every lip. The time has come for peaceful days and peaceful men. Good peaceful days. If I were free to speak my mind, I'd tell all mankind of how flowers bloom and fade, of how we fall and how we pay. When all mankind has ceased to fight, I'll raise my hand in thanks each night for this rich earth and all it means. Our golden days and peaceful dreams. One more time. If I were free to speak my mind, I'd tell a tale to all mankind of how flowers do bloom and fade, of how we fall and how we pay, of how we fall and how we pay. Let's continue our service with our offerings. And while we're doing that, we're going to play another song and invite you to sing on the chorus. The chorus is, we are the boat, we are the sea, I sail in you and you sail in me. Just a reminder of how we're all in this together. We are the boat, we are the sea, I sail in you, you sail in me. Spring sings into the river sings into the sea sings into the boat that carries you and me. So much have I so much have I. You're the guarantee to the peace. Sing with us. just a reminder of how much we need each other, and we're not in this world on the basis of our egos. Sometimes we think we are, but we really need each other. We're in this together. We're in this together. In unison, would you join with me, please? To the work of this fellowship, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action for all community, we dedicate our lives and these are our offerings. Now, do you have hymnals with you there? Yes. Okay, we're going to do a responsive reading. Number 671 is titled Freedom. John Milton, it's Freedom, 671. 671. Our faith and knowledge thrive by exercise as well as our limbs and complexion.
If the waters of truth flow not in perpetual progression, they sink into a muddy pool of conformity and tradition.
The light which we have gained was given us not to be ever staring on, but by to discover onward things more remote from our knowledge.
Where there is much desire to learn, there of necessity will be much arguing, much writing, and many opinions.
Give me liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to conscience above all liberties.
And though all the winds of doctrine were let loose to play upon the earth, so truth be in the field, we do injuriously to misdoubt perspective.
Who knows not that truth is strong next to the Almighty? She needs no policies, no stratagems, to make her victorious.
Let her and falsehood grapple. Whoever knew truth put to the worst in a free and open encounter.
Thank you. Thank you.
John Milton.
Anybody want to, just for the next minute or so, anybody want to respond to that reading? Anything in that reading jump out at you and grab you?
Yes. Did John Milton really say she needs no power? Did he use the pronoun she?
There it is. Can't deny it. How does that strike you? I mean, why did you bring that up?
Well, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Years of teaching and then retiring and then seeing the issue of pronouns, the big issue of pronouns. It was explained to me, a 30-year-old explained to me about the pronouns, which really makes so much sense. But this is wonderful to think that he really used the she.
So you're for it, not against it.
Pardon me?
You're for it, not against it.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, yes.
All right. That sounds like it. Anybody else want to react to that reading? Something jumped out at you that you've never thought about before, or? Yes, Robin.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in our day and time that we're more aware of falsehood being promulgated as truth. And it's in Milton's time that was happening. So, nothing new under the sun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting introduction to your sermon.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you all for sharing that, your thoughts on that. This gentleman right over here, Jim, I'm going to point right at him. He inspired this message this morning because last week he said, I'd like to hear how you made your way into Unitarian Universalism out of Methodism. So if it doesn't go over well, you can blame him. How many of, just a quick question, how many of you came out of a Protestant tradition. Okay, how many Catholics? Okay, how many atheists never had a religion? Okay. Okay, any Buddhist? All right. Relates to Buddhism. You know, when I say come out of that, I don't mean in our congregation up in Brevard, we have several self-confessing Christians, and they don't feel like they've necessarily come out of it. They've rethought it, but they haven't really left it. So when I say you come out of that, maybe you have it, maybe you still have parts of it that you carried with you, came out of it. I had lunch with Jim and Lyndon last week, and we got together because we wanted to swap stories of how we came out of our different faith backgrounds and found our way into UU. And we had a lively discussion. We could have kept going, but we had to call it quits on it. I had a friend of mine the other day that lives in Brevard. He comes to the UU congregation. I met with him the other day. He said, my wife and I started going to the Church of God. Oh boy. And he said, the great outdoors. The great outdoors. And I was growing up, I loved being outdoors. How many just loved being outdoors when you were growing up? Okay, great. I couldn't stand being indoors, and I was out playing in the yard or in the woods. We lived in Hendersonville, and there was a big woods by our house. We lived on Fleming Street, right across from the hospital, and a big old barn of a house. There was woods, and I played in that woods with my 4 sisters and 2 brothers all the time. There were 7 of us, and the community kids were playing that woods all the time. So I love the outdoors, and I love nature. I was raised in the United Methodist Church. We were like 3rd generation Methodists. My great-grandfather had gone to that church. And my great-grandfather built the courthouse in Hendersonville and some of the houses in Hendersonville. But if you go into Hendersonville, it's a big Methodist church on your right as you go into town. It's a huge Methodist church. And we were there every Sunday. It was like a second home for us. And I don't know how my mother did it, but she got all 7 of us ready to go to church. And we walked the 2 blocks down to the Methodist church. And like I said, it was second home for us. We'd go to Sunday school, we'd go to church. I was a member of the United Methodist Youth Fellowship. My father didn't go to church a whole lot. He would go on holidays, and I think there's a term for that, but I don't know what it is. But he was a holiday Christian. I think the Catholics call it A&P Christian. You go on Ash Wednesday and Palm Sunday, and they don't have any other time. But anyway, she would haul us off down there to church every Sunday. And we were raised in the Wesleyan tradition, and I probably don't even need to tell you what that tradition is all about. You're born a sinner. Sin is not an act. Sin is the condition. It's the condition you're in. You're born that way. It's the human condition. And the only way out of that is to accept the sacrifice that Jesus made for you to save you from your sins. I mean, we're raised with that mentality. That I call it a myth nowadays, but that in that tradition. Wesley also, his quadrilateral was, at the top was the Bible to guide us in our faith journey. The top was the Bible, and then church tradition, and down here reason, and then down lower experience. So experience, all of your experience, whatever experience you had to conform to either reason, but most of all, up at the top, it had to conform to the Bible. You couldn't have an experience that you could describe outside of the Bible. Every single experience you had, up, down, whatever, was interpreted through the lens of the Bible, according to Wesley. So there's nothing that could happen outside of the Bible. Now, if you noticed, we use turn that around. We put experience first.
Right.
And if it conforms to the Bible, fine. If it conforms to Buddhism, fine. we have all our different sources, so we're not limited to. Wesley called himself a one-book man, and of course that book was the Bible. But anyway, I was raised that way. I was taking a walk with my mother one afternoon because she liked to walk after church on Sundays if the weather permitted. We would walk around town by the high school all around there. But I was walking with her one afternoon, and she just kind of stopped and she looked out into the space and she said, what if all this is not true? And I was shocked that she had asked that question. I mean, I couldn't even think about the question. I was just thinking about my mother who said that. You know, what if all this is not true? And I think that was the first time in my life that I began to think about religion and Christianity and how I was raised and what I was being taught. What if all this is not true? And so that became sort of opening for me, sort of an opening to explore, to question. You know, the word question is made from the word quest. So when you ask a question, you put yourself on a quest. And I think that was the first time in my life that door opened for me, that it's okay to question that. In spite of all the reservations I had, as a result of that, I still chose a career in the ministry. And I was ordained in the United Methodist Church in 1984, even though I had those reservations. I didn't share them with anyone except my wife, but went into the ministry ready to, preach the gospel and do all that good stuff. One night, I was sitting in the living room and turned on the television, PBS, Power of Myth. Interview with Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers, and I was absolutely blown away.
Yeah.
I understood about that much of it. Much of it was over my head, but when I listened to it, I watched it. Then I watched all the 6 series of it after that. After that first one, I thought, okay, next week I'm going to watch the next one. I watched all 6 of them. Some years later, I bought the tapes and I watched them again. But I was absolutely blown away, fascinated, and very confused, very shaken up, not just intellectually, but emotionally shaken up, just thinking there's a whole big world out there that I don't know about, but I want to know about it. Some of the things he said in those tapes just boggled my mind, especially his visit to Japan and talking to the Shinto priest in Japan, because he's with an anthropologist, he's sitting with the Shinto priest, and this anthropologist is frustrated because he says, I don't get it, what's your theology? And finally, one of the Shinto priests says, well, we don't have a theology, we dance. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing, we don't have a theology, we dance. We dance out our deepest feelings and our deepest emotions, we dance them out. We don't need a theology. We don't need you to tell us about God. We just, we dance them out. The other thing a Shinto priest said to him was, Kevin was asking him about what he thought about Western religions, Judaism and Christianity specifically, and he said, man against God, God against man, nature against God, God against nature, man against nature, nature against man. Very funny religion. Very funny religion. Why we're opposed to everything. Why we have to be opposed to our own natures. Why we have to set up this sort of opposition between us and nature and God and each other. So it really made me start to think about that, and it threw me into a faith crisis. And for probably 15 years, I was a United Methodist minister in a faith crisis. And it wasn't fun because, to be honest, I felt a little hypocritical because I was saying stuff in the pulpit that I didn't believe anymore. And it was difficult. And I was leading classes. I taught at Brevard College for 10 years. I taught Old and New Testament introductory. It was a required course. I had to teach it. And it was hard teaching it. And every now and then I'd try to slip in a little Joseph Campbell, but it didn't go over too well. And in my congregation, I had a 3-point charge to begin with. 3 churches, one in Pisgah Forest, the only church in Pisgah Forest, English Chapel. I'd be there at 8:30, preach my sermon, jump in my car, drive over to Salika, and get there, about maybe 10:30, preach that sermon, jump in my car, drive to Rosamond. I always knew I was late when they were singing the hymn at Rosamond. They were waiting on me. I was late. In all those 5 years, though, I never got a ticket. Because if you wear your robe, the cops never give you a ticket. So anyway, all that time, I'm just, and the crisis is not getting any easier. It's getting more and more difficult to say that I'm a United Methodist minister and just not feel that that's what I am at all. And it was difficult. Turning point came one morning when I was in my office at Rosamond, the Rosamond Church. The office was in the basement of the church. The office was in the basement of the parsonage where I live. And it was a little teeny office. And someone had given me a gift years ago of a King James version of the Bible. Get this now, leather bound, red lettered, and gold, the edge of the pages were gold. It wasn't real gold, I'm sure, but they were, this was an expensive Bible. It was so expensive, I just never even touched it. I just laid it on my desk, Well, anyway, I'm in my office one morning, preparing for a sermon or whatever. And I look at that Bible, and a voice in my head says, bury it. Bury it. So I took that red letter Bible, got a shovel, went out the back door of the parsonage office, dug a hole, and buried it. And then right after that, the heavens opened up, and a big bolt of lightning came down and crashed. I'm just joking about that part. That didn't happen. In fact, it was the fact that didn't happen that I want to tell you that was the most liberating moment in my life when I was able to let go of the grip that book had on me. And it was not so much an intellectual experience as it was emotional. I was really, truly afraid of what might happen to me if I did that. But nothing happened. I wasn't punished by God for doing that. But that was a symbolic way for me to get out from under the grip of that mythology and to question it and to say it's okay to let it go. Nothing bad is going to happen to you if you let it go. And it was the most liberating, it was a turning point for me to do that. Bury that Bible and just say goodbye to that. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the Bible. I love it. But I also love the Bhagavad Gita. I love the Upanishads. I love the writings of Buddhism. I love Taoism. I love them all. Because they all have something to say to us. Because no one religion can contain the human soul and the spirit. The whole of who we are. No one religion can contain that. So we branch out and we find what speaks to us in the telling of our story and who we are. What's meaningful to us. So anyway, I'm at Brevard College teaching the Old and New Testament to half a dozen students who don't want to learn about it, and they resent it because it's required, but I have to teach it anyway. I made one student so angry because I questioned the Bible. He said in his evaluation, I wouldn't let this man teach my dog because he questions the Bible. He's probably coming out of a tradition where that's the work of Satan to make you do that. But it's sad, but anyway, that happened. Plugging along as best I can. I get a letter in the mail from a parishioner of mine, a former parishioner of mine, and it says to me, as chaplain of the college, as the spiritual leader of the campus, it is your duty to remove a cult that is meeting on campus property. Guess who that cult was? You all. You all a cult. Did you know that? Anybody who disagrees with me is in a cult. That's the way it works. Anyway, this guy was serious. He was a former parishioner of mine. The remainder of the letter said it's your duty to get them off campus. And then he said, my wife and our children will never set foot on this campus until that cult is removed from the campus. And so I went to the president of the college, Tom Bertrand, and he and I looked at the letter. And he said, we're not going to ask these people to move. We're not going to ask these people to leave our campus. You know what a cult is? A cult is where you're not allowed to question the leader. And if you look at all the cults that have been in America, like Jim Jones and David Koresh and Gate, whatever the Gate one was, I can't remember the name of it. Heaven's Gate. You look at those leaders, you don't question those leaders. And I had a friend of mine who was a teacher at Western Carolina. He said, you know, my son is in a cult. I said, well, what makes you think that? He said, well, he met with two of the leaders of the cult the other day, and they had the briefcases. And he asked them questions, and they closed their briefcases and walked out. Started to walk out, and he said, why are you leaving? He said, well, you don't question. You don't question. You just do. You don't question. That's a cult. Actually, the word cult is not originally not a pejorative term. It's where we get the word agriculture. Because cult formed in agriculture. And a cult is a series of ceremonies and rituals surrounding a core idea or a core person or a core object. For example, the Osiris cult was a cult of ancient Egypt surrounding the idea of growing corn. Osiris was the god of corn. So there were dances, rites, and rituals around that. And that's the original meaning of a cult, where we get the word cultivate. The word cultivate means to till, to take care of, to worship, to cultivate. It's where we get the word culture. But somewhere along the way, cult became a pejorative term, and it refers to what I just said. You don't question the cult leader. We have a cult in America, right? It's a political cult. Because the other thing about the core person or object that the cult is around, that person can never do anything wrong. If you're worshiping a cult leader, that cult, David Koresh, Jim Jones could never do anything wrong. Even if they told you to drink the Kool-Aid, you drank the Kool-Aid. So I would say UU is the last thing in the world to be identified as a cult. We also have a gun cult in this culture. We have a gun cult. It's a cult. And this object, the gun, is at the core of it. It's a cult. Anyway, go on and on and on about that. I'd never heard about Unitarian Universalists before. In my mind, it was like, okay, there's unity, there's unification, and there's Unitarian Universalists. Until someone from the worship committee of that little church meeting on our campus came to my office and said, would you mind speaking for our congregation? And I said, yeah, I'll speak to the UUs. And he was from the worship committee, and we talked, he and his wife, and I said, well, now, who do I get in touch with in terms of my sermon topic? And he said, well, you can just call either one of us and tell us what your topic is going to be. I said, well, you'll need some Bible verses. He said, if you want to use the Bible, that's fine. He said, but you don't have to. And I was like, what? And so I decided, okay, I'm going to really risk it, and I'm going to speak on the Gospel of Thomas. You know, Thomas is not in the Bible. You know, he's one of those tonight's going to go over, but I spoke on the Gospel of Thomas. I was so afraid of offending someone, I stopped right in the middle of the message. I said, I hope I'm not offending anyone. And some guy goes, oh, go on, you're not offending anybody. I said, oh, I'm free at last. Oh, boy. So they invited me back again, and I spoke again. And that time I spoke from Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, and they was like, oh, that's great. Oh, now I'm home. I'm home. This is where I needed to be a long time ago. And I had to go back to my chaplain duty and at the college. And about a month later, they came to me. They said, you know, we're looking for a part-time. And I said, I'll take it. And they said, well, we've got to go through the interview process. And so they did that. And they hired me part-time.
Part-time.
It didn't turn out to be part-time. It was like 20 hours a week. But anyway, my wife, you know, I had big cut and pay and all that stuff. And my wife said, go for it. You know, I said, I just want to do this. I want to be a part of this. I've got to be part of this community. And so they hired me after an interview process. And I thought to myself, I wonder what my friend who thinks that we're a cult, I wonder what he might be thinking when he finds out that I'm part of this cult now. Anyway, I loved it. And I remember opening the hymnal for the first time, just reading through the hymnal and reading through the readings. And it was pure, to me, it was just pure heaven. It was pure delight to feel that freedom, to experience that freedom to explore and to, you know, if you read our sources, at the very bottom of our sources, look at those. They're 7 pages in. And I was just blown away when, at that bottom line, the last thing it said below our sources, if you read that last line, grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith. I just, you know, we don't have to be so anti-other religion. We're not anti-other religions. But the fact that we see other traditions, other faiths, as enriching our own journey, you know, I just love that. And the third principle is the one that's always jumped out at me, free and responsible search for truth and meaning. But anyway, I like to sum up Unitarian Universalist in 3 words: choice, choice, and choice. You can make a choice. You can say yes or you can say no to something. You have that freedom to choose. And yes, we're heretics, and if you look up that word heretic, it means to be able to make a choice. And, you know, I got an email from Don the other day, and he said he liked being here because people are here because they want to be here. They don't feel like they're obligated to be here, or they have to be here out of duty, or if they don't come, the lightning might strike or whatever, you know. They're here because they want to be here. And I think unfortunately there's so much superstition and magic that's entered into our thinking about religion. And when I say that, you know, I just ask the question, what's the difference between religion and magic? What's the difference between a spell and a prayer? They're both words you speak. You speak a spell, you speak a prayer. What's the difference? Anybody? Well, to me, there's this compulsion behind magic and superstition. A compulsion, a force. You have to do it. And you have to say the spell exactly the way it's written. You have to perform the ritual exactly the way it's supposed to be performed. There's a compulsion. To me, true religion is a freeing experience. You know, the word religion means to relink, religio, to relink. Now, you interpret that whatever way you want to, but for me it means to relate to your own deep self. To relate, not your ego. Ego wants one thing. Yourself wants something more. You know yourself is not afraid of death. Yourself does not know time. Yourself does not know space. All that stuff is ego. You get in touch with your deep self. That's the relinking there. You know, we have a great tradition. I have a friend of mine the other day who used the word omnicide. Has anybody ever heard of that? Omnicide. Well, he, along with many people, believe that we're on the brink of committing global suicide. We're on the brink of committing global suicide. That's what he believes. And he used the word omnicide. We're killing ourselves. And so he said to me that getting our UU message out to the world is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Transformation is a necessity. We have got to transform ourselves and transform this planet. And I believe that our message, our UU message, can do that for people. Now, we're not evangelists. We don't go out and evangelize, but maybe we should think about being missionaries, maybe, and getting our message out there to people. Not in an arrogant way. Not as if we know all the answers and we have it all. Not that kind of way, but in a very humble way to get our message out to people. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope I haven't gone over time. What time is it? Okay. The church I was in Rosman had a clock on the back wall, and I thought, what they got the clock back there for? Nobody can see it but me.